So the final film we're going to be reviewing is Uncut Gems. It will be out on a short run in UK theaters, and then on the 31st will be on Netflix. Jim, tell us a little bit about this film.
So Uncut Gems is directed by the Safdie brothers, Josh and Ben. They've done several films before. I think the one that's probably best known, and the only other one I've actually seen of theirs, is Good Time, which starred Robert Pattinson and made quite a splash a couple of years ago in kind of, art house circles, I think. And basically the setup for the film is Adam Sandler is a jewellery store owner in the Diamond District in New York. He has acquired a black opal, which is, it's not been cut, it's not been polished, it's the kind of the raw gemstone, if you like. And we're introduced at the start of the film to this, and kind of it being mined in Ethiopia in very trying circumstances, and it very quickly transitions to Adam Sandler in New York. And basically it follows him trying to get this gem auctioned. Basically, he has paid quite a lot of money for it. He's under the impression he can get over $1 million for it at auction, and basically it's this spiraling set of circumstances, not too unlike their last film, where he lends this to a basketball player, Kevin Garnett, who seems to think it imbues him with mystical powers and allows him to play better. So he keeps it overnight. Needless to say, this doesn't really go according to plan, and Howard, who gets increasingly more frantic to try and get this back, and also has a bit of a gambling issue and is known to pawn clients' collateral at pawn shops. We see him doing that very early on. And basically, it's just how the situation continues to be just ahead of him, and him constantly trying to keep up with that situation. And then various other characters coming around it. Obviously, you've got Kevin Garnett, the basketball player. He's got a mistress. He's kind of semi-estranged from his wife, who's played by Idina Menzel. But apart from that, it's all kind of... There are quite a lot of first-time actors in here. His mistress is played by Julia Fox. And there are other characters that come in and out of the story. I think maybe a recurring one is Lakeith Stanfield, who people would know from Get Out, Sorry to Bother You, and things like that. So, what did you make of it?
Oh, boy. I mean, this film should come with an anxiety warning. I was about 10, 15 minutes in, and I genuinely considered turning it off because my heart was racing so fast. And I was at home alone, and I was like, hey, if something happens to me, but I'm so glad I stuck with it. I should note that 10, 15 minutes in, it wasn't that I wasn't liking it. It was that my body was having a physiological reaction to it. But I'm so glad I stuck with it. I genuinely think this is one of my favorite films of the last year. It is, talking about feats of filmmaking, the pace that they managed to keep up in this film, it does not pause for more than a second is it 2 hours 10? Obviously, Adam Sandler's the kind of the rock in the middle of this film, and that's a big thing. The Safdie brothers, I understand, have had this film kind of sitting on their desk for about 10 years now, and they always saw it as Adam Sandler was always that character, and they basically weren't going to make it until they convinced Adam Sandler to play that role. And I think they approached him probably about 10 years ago when they first kind of had the idea, and they themselves say quite fairly he brushed them off. They were not well known then, but I think it's brilliant that they've stuck around and waited for him to come along and play the character, because I just love watching him. I am not an Adam Sandler film fan, and by Adam Sandler film, everyone knows what I mean. I mean the Adam Sandler films. But, I enjoyed Punch Drunk Love. I enjoyed that film that he did with Don Cheadle a little while ago, the Reign Over Me. And I really do actually enjoy seeing him playing an interesting character. And the Safdie brothers said that they sort of took a lot of inspiration from Paul Thomas Anderson's desire to sort of build Punch Drunk Love around what he believed Adam Sandler was and what he believed Adam Sandler could convey, and they kind of did a similar thing. They wanted to create this character that was in some ways completely hopeless, but also so convinced by himself and his mission. You kind of pity him, but you root for him. You also kind of hate him a bit. You're shouting at the screen for him to make different decisions. And yeah, you know, you talk about these moments where he's pawning other people's belongings, and I think they did some really clever decisions with the structure there, where there are some things where you're like, okay, I understand what's going on, like I know what belongs to him, what doesn't belong to him, and then something that you realize that he's sold off or pawned maybe a couple of scenes ago, someone comes and up to him on the street and is like, hey man, where's my watch, or whatever it is, and you realize quite how tangled this web he's in is, and he has no desire to get out of it. Like that is a character with a gambling addiction, that is a character with all sorts of things going on in their head that they don't want it to slow down, they don't want it to stop. And it's such a rich film in its design as well. You know, they create this his home life, so his family, but also his extended family. Medina Menzel plays his estranged wife, and they go and they spend time at her family's, and there's all these women, and they're loud, and they're trying on dresses, and they're screaming, and all the men are sitting and smoking cigars, and it's not a world that you necessarily want to go and spend much time in yourself, but it's well created, it's rich, it's really believable, and yeah, I loved it.
It's funny you mentioned the thing about people being loud in the family home, because this is an incredibly anxious film, right? It is really quite anxiety-inducing. One of the things that struck me about this film is, and I think it is actually one of the things that in the early stages actually really sets this anxious tone straight away, is quite how many people are talking over one another. Like in the jewellery store, it's very unusual for a film to do that, or at least to foreground that. You know, like people talking over each other is a common thing, but it's usually like background noise to a scene, and the conversations and dialogue are very well structured. In the opening scenes of Uncut Gems, that is not the case. It is utter chaos, and it's all very kind of like trivial. There's nothing terribly dramatic happening at that precise point, but it puts you right into the correct kind of like state of mind for this film straight away. And then after that, everything... It's one of these films where I think everything combines to just create this atmosphere that we've spoken about. The music, I think, is part of that as well, and that's very similar to... I think it's the same person, Daniel Lopatin. My pronunciation's terrible. But it's the same person who collaborated with the Safdies to do the score for Good Time, which this does share quite a lot of similarities with. But what's interesting about it is, to me, it feels like a far less kinetic film. There's a lot of stuff going in Good Time, which kind of centres on a bank robbery gone wrong, where, you know, Robert Pattinson's sprinting about the place and the camera follows him. It's still got that kind of like, you know, jittery handheld quality to it in certain places, but it's a far more speedy film. What's interesting about Uncut Gems is it maintains a momentum, it maintains a jitteriness and an anxiety, whilst being, in a way, quite deliberate. I mean, it doesn't follow Sandler at great, but I mean, there are tracking shots where they track him down a street, and as you say, like people coming up and saying, you know, hi Howard, how you doing, and all that. But it's all very deliberate, and it's kind of just this constant building of tension, and then it gets you to a level very quickly, and then it holds it for the entire film as the whole thing just spirals around him, and all the decisions really play into that. I think I'm not really sure anybody other than Adam Sandler could really play this role, because it needs that frustration with this guy, because he does some really idiotic things. He does some things which are obviously a symptom of addiction as well. And all these things are going on, but he still, and I think this is down to Sandler, it still retains that kind of like core likability that means you empathise with him, right? As frustrated as you are still with this character, right? He doesn't lose you or certainly he didn't lose me at any point. So it's one of these films that I think has a strange alchemy where all these things come together to create an atmosphere and a mood that just has you hooked the entire time. And I haven't been as anxious in a film since Lynn Ramsey, You Were Never Really Here. Completely different type of film, but that was one where I felt like I was having an anxiety attack for 2 hours solid. It's not quite up there, but it is one of these films where you will find it hard to shake off immediately afterwards because you're just going to feel so tense and on edge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if anyone's looking for a present for me in the next year, then I would love a Diamante encrusted Furby to hang around my neck. Possibly one of the greatest little props that the film has. But yeah, I mean, I think it's going back to the sort of like physiological effect that this film had on me. There's a moment maybe about beginning of the final third where Adam Sandler's character is faced with yet another decision of which way he goes. And I felt like I was almost suspended for just like a couple of seconds as you wait. You're like, this is it. If he just makes the right decision here, he's going to be out of it. So, and then you just like, you drop down and he, you know, obviously makes the wrong decision once again.
Okay, so as Amanda said, it's out on January 31st on Netflix, so everybody will be able to watch it then. It is getting a short run in cinemas as this goes out. It should be screening at the Film House, I believe, for at least another couple of days. So if you get a chance to see it on a big screen, as ever, as I tend to end up saying on the show, I think it's worth it, but if not, then anybody could watch it on Netflix, and I would highly recommend it. And last time I checked, their previous film, Good Time, was also on Netflix, so if you like Uncut Gems, I'd encourage you to check that out afterwards as well.